Good morning. Welcome to our June Keys penguin habitat. I haven't done this in a while, so I'm just making sure that our microphone goes through. So I'm going to have our social media girl text me as soon as we get that. But hi, my name is Frankie. I'm an aviculturist here at the Aquarium of the Pacific. And I'm about to feed our Magellanic penguins. Now we have 22 birds here on our habitat, most of which are ages 6 and above, but we've got about 7 birds that are in their younger age group between ages 2 and 5. And today we're going to be feeding some herring and capelin. Today is also a theraprim day where our birds are going to be getting some medicine. It's an anti-malarial medicine that just helps them maintain their health, and it's a preventative. They also get different types of preventatives throughout the year, but every other day they do get this anti-malarial medicine. You'll notice there's a bunch of birds around me, so in just a moment I'm going to start feeding. There we go. It looks like I see me. Aha! I've gotten the text that you can hear me, but it's a little delayed, so now I'm going to start my presentation. Like I said, I'm going to be offering some herring, which is larger, and capelin, which is smaller, to all of our birds. And these are Magellanic penguins. They can be found off the coast of Chile and Argentina. And right now we have officially ended our breeding season, and soon we'll be entering our molt. So we're in a middle period where some of the birds are eating a lot and some of them aren't eating as much. But if you do have any questions, please feel free to comment in the comment section and I'll get that question sent over to me. And if you don't have any questions, enjoy. I'll sign back on in just a few moments to answer all of your questions. Thank you. All right, if you're just joining us, thank you and welcome. Again, my name is Frankie and I'm an aviculturist here at the Aquarium of the Pacific, and I am feeding our Magellanic penguins. And I already have a question that has come through, and it was, how do you make sure that all of the penguins get their food, or their medicine anyway? And that was Anderson. Pardon me if I interrupt and say a random bird's name. We do mark down every single fish, and that actually is the answer to your question. We mark down every fish that every single bird eats, and that allows us to follow if they've gotten their medicine or not. We'll prepare a bucket for them. So right now, oh, she didn't eat it. I was offering a capelin to Kate. But what we do is we'll prepare our fish separately or early on, or if we absolutely have to, we can prepare it here on the deck, and we hand the food out to every single bird. Now, right before we went live on the camera, we actually fed most of our birds at the door, And that is just to get them used to being in the back and feeding and desensitizing them in case we ever need to train them or have them in the back for any need. They're comfortable with eating back there. So a chunk of our birds did get some food just a couple of minutes ago. But we are able to mark down on this handy dandy sheet, for example, Admiral, Anderson, Astaire, Dee, Fisher, Floyd, Heidi, Kate, Paddles, Roxy, Skipper, Wally, and Gats have all eaten their food. All of these birds have different bands on each of their flippers. If they're a male, their band will be on the right side, and if they're a female, the band is on their left side. And I know that there are several people that are able to come on and know every single bird. So if you want some more information on the birds, you can go on the Aquarium of the Pacific website and figure out their bands and who each bird is, or even go to explore.org, where there are a plethora of people talking about all the penguins, what their daily doings are. It's pretty entertaining. My next question from Sharon is, how big do they normally get? These are all full-size penguins. They will vary in size. Oh, hi, Jade. Meaning that just genetically a bird could be a smaller bird. Matson got his medfish. So they could be a smaller bird, but we're looking at any weight between 3.5 kilograms to 6 kilograms, which is somewhere around 9 to 12 pounds. The 12-pound is a really big bird, but sometimes they have those tall genes, so they can carry a little bit more weight on them. And they'll actually get to that full size at 60 days old. So once a chick hatches, they are eating lots and lots and lots of food and growing very quickly. So they're only the size of their egg when they hatch, which is about the size of my palm. And then their parents will both offer food to them. They will regurgitate, and the chick will take their food that way for several weeks, and then they'll start eating small chunks of food until they are ready to start eating whole fish. At about 40, 50 days old, they'll start doing that, and then 60 to 80 days, they are full size. So that's when they'll get to that 3.5 to 6 kilograms, somewhere in there, and they'll keep growing a little bit, but for the most part, they're full size. Vicky asked, are any of the penguins pregnant? No, we actually have finished our breeding season. There are some penguins in the banded penguin family that will lay their eggs year-round. Actually, all of the other penguin species will lay their eggs year-round. And those other banded penguins are the Humboldt, Galapagos, and African penguins. And since none of those penguin species go through a migration period, they don't go through an intentional migration period, their seasons don't have to line up like the Magellanics. But Magellanic penguins go through a very intentional 3 to 4 month migration season, which means that they can't be laying eggs while they're in the water swimming for that period. So they have a span of a couple of months between March and May where they will lay their eggs, incubate, brood, raise their chicks. So we are well into July. We didn't have any viable eggs this year. So none of our birds are taking care of any more eggs. We've actually closed off most of our burrows, with Jade and Skipper closing off our breeding season. And we just happen to have Skipper right here in front of me and Jade right there if you wanted to figure out who those last two birds were. Now I have Whatever in front of me. She's our oldest bird in the colony. She's also our tiniest bird. And that has everything to do with genetics. As I was mentioning before, sometimes you get a big bird like Gats here, or you get a smaller bird like Whatever, and Gats is only a couple of years old, maybe 3 now, and Whatever is 18. So it really just depends on how each bird's genetics go. How many fish do they eat? Isaac has asked, and that really depends as well. So as I mentioned briefly, there's a migration season, which goes right into their breeding season. And then we enter molt. So molt is our next big season that's coming up. And that is a very stressful season that all of our penguins go through. And that is when they will, molting is when an animal sheds their fur, feathers, or skin. And since these are birds, they're shedding their feathers. But penguins, most penguins go through a catastrophic molt where they are replacing those feathers in 3 to 5 days. That's 75 feathers per square inch and hundreds of thousands of feathers per bird that is being replaced in a very short period of time. So why am I telling you that? Because when these jade medfish, when these birds are replacing those feathers, they're not waterproof. And if they're not waterproof, then they are not able to swim. And if they can't swim, they can't hunt for their food. So they actually are going to start eating a lot of food very soon. And that's going to be called their bulk up period. So you should be seeing in the next several weeks, maybe into mid-August, these birds are going to balloon up. And you'll know when they're molting. They look like zombies with brown feathers. They're very patchy. If you can't wait until then, I encourage you to Google some photos. But they will start bulking up and eating more and more. So during a migration season where they might only eat 4 or 5 fish a day, herring, let's use herring as our reference, which is our larger fish, where they might only eat 4 or 5 of these a day during migration, they might eat 10 or 12 or 15 of these a day when they're bulking up. And they'll bulk up to be nice and large for that molting season. And the reason that they molt is to replace those feathers, but it's not just to get new feathers, it's to ensure that their waterproofing is nice and ready to go for that migration period, which is kind of that area that I talked about at the beginning. Before they're breeding, they're in migration and then breeding and then molt. So they are actually replacing all of those feathers, and then they spend weeks. They only have a couple of days where they actually physically replace the feathers, but they're now spending weeks waterproofing. So if you take a look, I'm going to point on the backside of Gat's here, right here on his tail, is his uropygial gland, or his preen gland, or his oil gland. It's all the same. And that is where they will dip their beak into that gland, and oils will secrete, and they'll actually take their beak in various ways, whether they do it in the water or on land, and they'll start coating all of their feathers, all of their brand new non-waterproof feathers, and making and ensuring that they are nice and waterproof for that next migration season. So that actually takes several weeks, sometimes 6 weeks. So they're going to be on deck. It's kind of stressful. They're replacing lots and lots of feathers in a short period of time. It's our hottest time of the year. And all of that lines up perfectly, because as soon as they are nice and molted and waterproof, they get in the water, and shortly after their migration starts. So those are just a couple of the big seasons these animals go through. But of course, there's some smaller sub seasons, you could say, they go through as well. I've got a couple more questions. Let's see. Michelle asked, who is your bossiest bird? I'm going to say Lily. I don't know if that's a popular opinion, but that's my opinion. She's just the first to the bucket, the first to want food. And sometimes she's not even hungry. She just wants to be in charge of where that food goes, or if that bird gets to have the food. Every single one of our birds have their own personalities, and that's actually one of the ways that we get to know them and learn to identify all of our birds, is just by merely watching them come to the bucket, learning how each individual bird likes to eat. Of course, they have those bands that we use as backup if we get confused. Some of the bands are similar in color. But when it comes down to it, it's all personality. And I'm just going to answer that question today with Lily, but that answer can change, so don't hold me to it. How long have you been working at the aquarium? Vicky has asked. I have been here since 2015, but I didn't start working with the penguins until sometime around 2017 or 2018. So where I work with our penguins here. I also help out with all of our birds, but mainly our aquatic birds. So you'll see me doing things with our diving birds, which are puffins and guillemots and auklets, or our shorebirds, which is the exhibit just next door. And then, of course, there's any kind of coverage that we may do here in our mammal and bird department. You'll notice that they're not here at the bucket anymore, and that's okay. I'm going to keep hanging out for a few more minutes answering questions. So if you do have any, please send them on in. Again, my name is Frankie, and I'm an aviculturist here at the Aquarium of the Pacific, where I am feeding our Magellanic penguins. And these penguins can be found off the coast of Chile and Argentina, which means that they're a temperate species and they do not require snow or ice to survive. So my next question is, do they ever hunt for fish at the aquarium? And we do this every once in a while, where we have some sardines where they are live sardines that are treated and have no bacteria. So it's a little bit of a process for us to get sardines. Once we're able to do that, maybe once or twice a year, it's pretty entertaining. However, since they do get hand fed every single day, they're not very great at it. They do a good job of chasing the birds and kind of stabbing them, but it's definitely something each of our birds can work on. But since they don't need to know how to hunt a fish, they don't do it so well. But we do offer some live sardines every once in a while to them. And then actually I want to take a moment to talk about our Brazilian rescues, because those birds did live a life once where they were able to hunt for live fish. So we have 3 Brazilian rescues here with us at the Aquarium of the Pacific. We have Kate, Robbie, and Roxy. And all 3 of those birds were deemed non-releasable in 2011 when they were found stranded off the coast of northern Brazil. And basically they all had different issues which were okay enough for them to survive, but they were not fit to survive in the wild. So there were several birds, I think about 16 birds, that were divvied out across different facilities with Magellanic penguins. And today we have Kate, Robbie, and Roxy. And all of them are a little bit more on the wild side, if you will, when it comes to penguins. So I think those ones would do pretty well hunting. But those birds are also really important for our species survival plan. If you've never heard of that, another way that we use that term is an SSP, and that has everything to do with genetics in the animal's survival within an animal care facility. So although we are our one colony, we're only a subset of penguins within all of the United States. And when it comes to reproducing and growing all of our colonies, we have to take into account what everyone is going through and how all of the genetics are going through. So when we have 2, we like to call them wild or founder birds, or our Brazilian rescues, if they lay an egg, those genetics are really important because they haven't been seen. They're not already well distributed throughout the entire colony and other facilities. So at times penguins tend to be traded within different facilities to keep the genetics going. And at this moment, I think we have somewhere around 230 Magellanic penguins within all of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. And with the genetics that we have now, excluding any future wild birds or founder birds that may come in if they are rescued, we should be good to continue our colonies for about 250 years. So if there were other birds that were deemed non-releasable and not fit to survive in the wild and they joined a colony, that would only add to that number. So we have to keep our genetics variable. And if you continue to enjoy our penguinsunexplored.org, we do have a lot of people that are doing an amazing job following, and you'll probably get more details on personalities and who is whose parent on there as well. But I could give you a little information. We have Roxy and Floyd, who have laid the most eggs here, and Roxy happens to be one of those Brazilian rescues, and they have raised, I think we have 7 of their offspring here on our deck, which would be Anderson, Dee, Heidi, Lily, Skipper, Wally, and Gats. So those 7 birds are all Roxy and Floyd's chicks, and they are very well represented here at the Aquarium of the Pacific, but those genetics aren't represented somewhere else. So there's lots of things that could happen with the colonies to ensure the longevity of the species within zoos and aquariums. It looks like I might have a few more questions, but first I want to remind you that my name is Frankie, first and foremost, and I'm an aviculturist here at the Aquarium of the Pacific. And thank you all so much for tuning in. If you've got questions, please feel free to type them in the comments, and I've got someone sending them over to me. This is a fun new way we've adapted to being able to have our shows without a full and live audience here at the Aquarium of the Pacific. I think I might have skipped a couple questions. Let's see, Jordan asked, do the penguins know their own names? I think a few penguins 100% know their names, and I think they take advantage of that because it's still a thought and we're not sure. We don't train them to come to us for their names. I think we could get to that point if that was our goal as an institution, but at this point for now, they don't need to know their own names. It matters that we know who each of the birds are and we know who they're all paired up with. But I think a few know their names just because in time they were able to figure that out. But it was never anything that we intentionally rewarded them for or trained them to know. Who's the lovebird? Louisa has asked. I'm just going to say Admiral. Admiral Fancy Pants is sitting right next to Sarah here. And I don't believe I introduced Sarah. Sarah is one of our mammalogists here at the Aquarium of the Pacific. And she is helping me out with this penguin feed. And Admiral is sitting next to her, and he's good. He's a good one to claim that title of the lovebird. Vicky has asked, how old do the penguins get? In a wild setting, the age of 10 to 15 is a pretty old age for most animals, but especially Magellanic penguins. But in a setting like the Aquarium of the Pacific, where we have access to food and water, there are no predators, and a veterinarian who's on call 24/7, these birds can live up to 35 or even 40 years. So we have a fairly young colony, as we only opened back in 2011. And I mentioned a couple of birds. We have Patsy, who's 16 or 17, and whatever is 18. And they kind of stream down from there. And so that's where our age group is. We have a lot of birds that have hatched since we opened. So a lot of birds are between or under the ages of 8 and 9. Let's see. Another question I've got is from Isaac. What do they feel like? Are they always wet? So a couple of moments ago, I talked to you about waterproofing. So I'm going to reiterate that just in case there's any new folks that have signed in. All birds, most birds, I shouldn't say all, a cormorant is an exception, for example. Most birds have a waterproofing mechanism within their body where they're able to secrete an oil where they will use their beak or other parts of their body to ensure that all of their feathers are nice and waterproof. And what does that mean? When you think about something that's waterproof, you can see the water rolling off their backside. So if you were to see the penguins right now, although they're entering molt soon because their feathers are getting very old, you can see that there's water on their backside. And as they become more waterlogged, they're getting even closer to molt. So right now, some of the birds look like they're a little bit more wet than other birds, and other parts of the year, they don't look as wet. So you kind of have caught me in a time where some of our birds look really dry all the time, like Admiral here, Admiral Fancy Pants, or some look a little bit disheveled and their feathers are a little bit separated, like Ludwig over here, or maybe that's Floyd. But it just really depends on the time of year, but they are very dry feeling. The water literally rolls off their backside when they're nice and waterproof. And if they're not waterproof, that is a wonderful way for us to know that something may be wrong if we're not entering molting season. So if feathers are the #1 indicator of a bird for us to know something may be wrong. If they're not well enough to maintain their plumage, we have to question what's going on with that bird. So they are not always feeling wet. They're actually pretty fluffy if they're the bird that lets us preen them or help them maintain their feathers. Sometimes if you can go against the grain and feel their feathers, it's pretty fluffy, and they have a lower layer that is downy. So when they're chicks, they are just a big fluff ball of a penguin. And as they get older and they get that nice black coat of feathers, it's a little bit more slick. The feathers are longer, so they are very soft and dry depending on the time of year. I noticed that there are some rocks embedded near the water line. Are they to help the penguins get out of the water? Absolutely, but they're also here to provide the type of substrate that these penguins require. Not all animals require the same type of substrate. Substrate meaning it could be dirt or sand or rocks or gravel or rocks or plants, whatever they may need. So those type of rocks can be found in their natural habitat. But yes, they will use those to kind of latch onto and jump out of the water. And also it's great support for their feet. A lot of times when you look at the bottom of a bird's foot, it tells you exactly the kind of surface that they need. And when you look at the bottom of their feet, they are nice, soft, rounded surfaces where they can apply all of their weight and get out of the water with. And if you take a look, Patsy's actually coming out of the water right now. Patsy's one of our older birds, around 16 or 17. Forgive me, I don't remember the exact age. I'm hoping she'll take a fish from me right now because she's one of the few who hasn't eaten yet. But if she doesn't eat now, we'll come back later for another feed. If you're just joining, my name is Frankie and I'm an aviculturist here at the Aquarium of the Pacific. And I am going to be wrapping up this feed soon for our Magellanic penguins. And right now I have Patsy in front of me and Ludwig next to her. Looks like they're just coming to visit. Whoop. Just making sure I didn't skip any questions. Oh, first I want to give a shout out to those of you from the UK, Houston, Fort Worth, Texas, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Milford, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. Wow, that's an amazing crowd. Normally I see things like Florida, Illinois, and Wyoming, which is my family, but Guess they're not here today. That's okay. Hi, Mom. Do they fight sometimes, and do you let them play out and hopefully work it out, or do I go in and intervene? That's a great question. I do a little bit of both. Penguins, like most animals, will fight, can and will fight to the death if they want to. So if a fight ever gets that bad, yes, I will intervene and separate them. We've got a holding space in the back to let them cool down, and we'll put them back on exhibit. But also they can just be in a small little scuttle, and we want to make sure that they are able to assert their dominance, figure out whose space is whose, and just let them have those little squabbles, because that is important. We do have 9 burrows or nest boxes here in our habitat. And so during breeding season, that is when you'll see it the most, especially as the younger birds are getting a little bit older and hormonal and thinking that a space is theirs when an older and dominant bird has already claimed that space. I have 2 more questions, and unfortunately I do have to sign off, but if there are any other questions, I can relate those answers back in the comments. What's the most herring you've ever fed a penguin in one feed, and who was it? I don't remember. Let's see. We've got, I'll have to think, because we have not entered our bulk season this year. I'm just gonna give a little bit of a cop-out answer, because Gats is one of our biggest birds, and Gats can eat the most food, and I know that he's been able to eat probably 13 or 15 herring in a day, but that is not a fact. That's just something I'm kind of recalling, and we're going to be entering that bulking up season very soon. So maybe if you ask again in a couple weeks, if we're able to do that live Q&A again, I'll have a better answer for you. What is the water temperature in the water? We are at a nice 65, 64, 63 degrees. It's definitely not our coldest exhibit, but it does mimic their natural habitat and their natural water that they experience. I do work with our other aquatic birds, our diving birds, our puffins, which are located in the Northwest, mainly Alaska, and that exhibit is 47 degrees. So I do not mind diving or taking care of this water, because that other tank is a lot colder. All right, I want to take a moment to thank you again so much for joining myself and Sarah. Again, my name is Frankie. I'm an aviculturist here at the Aquarium of the Pacific, and I'm about to sign out. Unless I get any last minute questions coming through on my phone, I'm going to sign out. I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. We are open in our outdoor exhibits only, including our Magellanic penguins, but also we have our ray touch pool, our shorebirds, our pinnipeds, which are our seals and sea lions, our shark lagoon, our lorikeets, and a moon jelly touch tank. So if you're local and you want to swing on by, please come to the Aquarium of the Pacific. Sadly, our indoor facilities are closed due to our current circumstances, but maybe soon we'll be able to open back up. But until then, hopefully we can sign in and give you some virtual Magellanic Penguin Q&As. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful day. And again, if there are any questions I couldn't answer, I'll try and get that to our media relations team and get those answered. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.